Well, good morning, everyone. As you're coming in, thank you so much on behalf of the Jewish Heritage Center of Western Canada for attending our Holocaust and Human Rights Symposium this morning. My name is Belle Jarneski, and I would like to begin by acknowledging that this event is being live streamed from ancestral lands on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the national homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge that northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. We also affirm that our commitment to never forget must also include confronting attempts to destroy Indigenous culture and nationhood and condemning attempts to deny that historical reality. We would also like to thank the sponsors of the symposium and of our work throughout the year, the Grossberg Endowment Fund at the Jewish Foundation of Manitoba, the Asper Foundation, and of course, the Azrieli Foundation. We are also grateful to the Jewish Federation of Winnipeg for their year-round support. And thank you too to the Holocaust Education Committee of the Jewish Heritage Center of Western Canada. I am so thrilled to welcome students today from more than 70 schools across the province of Manitoba. I want to thank all the wonderful teachers for bringing their students to this important event, but also for the important work that you do in your classrooms, teaching your students about this tragic chapter of human history and how easily hate, conspiracy theories, and propaganda facilitated a genocide. In 2002, the late Elie Wiesel said, "Whoever listens to a witness becomes a witness." And today, you have an incredible opportunity to hear from a witness, a survivor of the Holocaust. We are now 80 years since the end of World War II, and the very memory of the Holocaust is under siege through denial, distortion, and conspiracy theories. Today, we are witnessing a staggering rise in anti-Semitism, and sadly, it often seems as if the world has learned nothing and seemingly forgets that by 1945, the voices of 2 out of every 3 European Jews had been silenced forever. The 6 million men, women, and children who were murdered simply because they were Jews. The youngest of our survivors, those few children who survived the inferno, are nearing 90 years of age, and many who were in their teens at the time of the Shoah are now well into their 90s. So you are among the last group of students who will be fortunate enough to hear a Holocaust survivor speak. We are counting on you to remember this day throughout your lives and take on the responsibility of being a witness and to carry the voices of our survivors forward. Now, a quick word of housekeeping. First, a reminder that this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next few days. Please enter any questions you have in the Q&A box, not the chat. We would love it, of course, if you include your name and your school, but if you prefer to ask your questions anonymously, that's okay too. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Michelle Sadowski is an experienced educator with almost 20 years working in the field of education. As the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, she was always drawn to the stories and history of her family. And now, as the educator for the Holocaust Survivor Memoirs program, she works to create engaging and meaningful educational materials that highlight the memoirs written by Canadian Holocaust survivors. In addition to developing new materials and working closely with survivor authors, Michelle facilitates educator workshops and professional development opportunities across the country. And she will be interviewing Holocaust survivor Kitty Salsberg today. Kitty was born in Budapest, Hungary on November 14, 1932. Orphaned after the war, Kitty and her younger sister Ellen immigrated to Canada in 1948 through the Canadian Jewish Congress's War Orphans project. In Canada, Kitty and Ellen were placed in separate foster families and allowed to continue their education. Kitty excelled in her studies and graduated from Teachers College in 1954. She enjoyed a long and fulfilling career, eventually earning her master's degree in education. She raised 6 children and fostered 6 teenagers and lives in Toronto. Kitty and her late sister Ellen are the authors of the Azrieli survivor memoir, Never Far Apart, Unies dans l'épreuve in the French version. And a reminder to teachers that you can still order Kitty's memoir for your class from the Azrieli Foundation Survivor Memoirs program at no cost. And so, Kitty and Michelle, I am honored to turn over the virtual microphone to you.
Thank you so much for having us. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Belle, for that beautiful introduction. As Belle mentioned, my name is Michelle Sadowski, and I'm an educator for the Azrieli Foundation's Holocaust Survivor Memoirs program. If you don't already know the program, we publish memoirs that were written by Holocaust survivors, just like Kitty, who moved to Canada after the war, and we make those memoirs completely free for students and teachers across the country. Our program's been operating for 20 years, and in 20 years, we have given away almost 1 million books for free, which is pretty amazing. We've published 128 author stories, and so you are probably very familiar with this one already. This is Kitty's book, Never Far Apart. But before we jump into our conversation, I just wanted to highlight something that Belle mentioned, which is the importance of hearing firsthand and first-person accounts. We hear about important moments in history, and often the things we remember are the dates and the statistics and the countries that we hear about. But the thing that's most important is listening to the stories of the actual human beings who experienced it. And how lucky are we that we have Kitty with us today to share pieces of her experience with you. And as Belle mentioned, what a lucky and fortunate experience that is. So I'm so happy that you're here. I want to note that the Holocaust was not inevitable. It happened through a series of choices by many people and many governments and many nations. Populations believed and accepted misinformation, and they never really questioned anything. So if there's any lesson that anyone can take away, it's that critical thinking skills are so important. And when we see something on the news or on the internet or on social media, I want you to really have that feeling inside your belly that questions it, that says, how do I know if this is true? Is this credible? Who made this? And how can I fact check it? And that is probably the most important lesson, especially with our world today, that you can take from really any of the past historical events that we studied together. So all of that being said, I am now so excited to start my beautiful conversation with the incredible Kitty Salsberg. Did you want to say hello to everyone?
Well, I'm so glad I have the opportunity to communicate with so many young people. I love teaching, and this is like a déjà vu. I can go back and talk to you, and I wish that you could be asking me questions personally.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get to hear their questions at the end. So let's start. So as Belle mentioned, Kitty, you were born in Budapest, Hungary in 1932. Can you tell us a little bit about what your family was like and your childhood in Budapest?
Well, my family on my mother's side were traditional Jewish people, and they sort of became assimilated, more or less. They were working class people. They were not well-to-do. My mother made a very serious mistake and married a young man who was mean to her, and she had her parents divorce her, which was unheard of, and so she was a failure in the life of society. But then along came my father, who was a new immigrant to Hungary, and probably because he needed a work permit or something of that sort, he married my mother. So they were not a good match, and they were not a happy couple. But what was special is they both loved me and my sister unconditionally. So even though they had their differences, as well as they had their serious financial problems because my father was not a good provider, the children themselves felt terribly loved. We could do no wrong. And I think in the long run, it has given me a tremendous amount of self-confidence later in life as well, because I knew I was okay, and as far as I was concerned, whatever people said about Jews is not true, because I know how nice I am and how smart I am and all that stuff. So it has given me a self-love because my parents loved me so much.
Beautiful. And what was life like in Hungary? Because we know that the Holocaust happened in lots of countries and every country is a bit different. So what was life like in Hungary?
Well, I don't know about the Hungary. The Hungary was basically an agricultural country, but I lived in Budapest, which was the capital of Hungary, and it was much more advanced than many other. It was a little bit called the Paris of that area. We had very few parks and a lot of tall buildings. I lived in one of the apartments that was in the poor section. That wasn't so great. But we had no electricity or hot water or even an indoor washroom. But other apartments did, in the well-to-do places. And people were educated, but in our family, we were not. We were working class people.
Beautiful. Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about new laws that were introduced to Hungary and how that impacted you and your family?
When the war broke out, I believe in 1939, I think, I was born in end of 1932, so it was...
You were 7. 7 or 8.
No, not even that. I was about 7. 7 years old, and I was in grade 2. I was not aware of laws so much, but very soon the families felt the laws in the fact that they could not hold jobs, and in a year or two, we weren't allowed to go to school, Jewish children. So I was already fairly advanced in my school because I was a good student. But my little sister and my cousins who were younger than me, being taken out of classrooms made them actually handicapped for the rest of their lives academically. Because once things were over and they were put back by age and not by need of what they needed to catch up with. So as far as laws were concerned, I knew very little because I was young. But I know that my grandparents had to close their little stall that was in the open market, and my father, and other men, and young men, and older men were all taken out to be working as slave laborers for the army. So we lost my father, and he was not there anymore. I was isolated myself because I developed TB. And so not only did I lose my father, I also lost my mother and my little sister in a way because I had to stay with my grandparents.
Can you explain what TB is? Because I don't know if all the kids know.
Tuberculosis,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And I'm not sure what it is, but it's bad and it's still affecting me to some extent. I can very easily, it weakens your lungs, it scars your lungs, and people die from it. And of course, a Jewish child certainly did not get any kind of special help. The cure for me was to be staying isolated and not doing very much. I was left at the age of 9 or so with my grandparents, and my grandparents were out all the time. I was left alone in the apartment. So I listened to the music on the radio. We had radio, and I went through my grandmother's cupboards and looking for books, and I read all kinds of books that were really meant for adults. So in a way, I got myself a little bit more advanced education than children who were in the elementary school.
Beautiful. So at some point in the war, you are then told that you need to move to the Budapest ghetto. So can you talk a little bit about how you felt moving to the ghetto and then what the conditions were like there?
Well, because we were not necessarily together. First, before people moved to a ghetto, they were collected into segregated Jewish houses. Mm-hmm. So they had a system, and this was in Budapest. Now, I don't know how it was in other parts of Hungary, but in Budapest, the remaining people, because the fathers, grandfathers, and young men were gone, so all these mothers and children and grandmothers were told they have to leave their apartments and go to these designated Jewish houses. And they were crowded in there. So there would be several people in an apartment building, in each individual apartment. Now, I loved it because here we had electricity, and we had a bathroom inside the apartment. And of course, when I was telling my aunt who has taken me, because I still wasn't given back to my mother to protect my mother, because she really couldn't handle 2 children. So my Aunt Margaret took me. I was telling my aunt, they have a bathroom with a bathtub in it and everything. And she was saying, be quiet, don't say that, don't tell them that we did not have these things in our home. So I guess she was a bit ashamed for being so poor. But I really like being in a segregated house, you know. I'm sure the other people didn't. And my aunt did a very special thing. She was connected, our family was connected with an open market, our family was involved with a lot of people who were selling different kinds of foods, you know, just like we have all kinds of things. And my family was selling poultry, dead poultry. And we could exchange things with other farmers and with other shopkeepers. And so we had food even in the segregated house. And my aunt, oh, pardon me, I forgot to tell you, we all had to wear a designated yellow star because the Jews in Hungary didn't look different from other people. we didn't look like the caricatures that they made of us. So they had to have a star. I had a star sewn on my coat, including children, they had to do it. And my aunt took off the star whenever, every so often, from her coat, and would go and get bags of food, and went over to my mother and to my aunt, who had small children, had no way of getting any food. And she would be giving away the food that she brought. And of course, that was punishable by death if she would have been caught. And I found this out when one day she figured out that it was safe for me to go along because nothing happened to her. You see, she bribed the person who was in charge of making sure the apartment building door was locked. But for money, that lady was willing to open the door and let somebody in or out. So we went out, and my aunt took me along to see my mother and my little sister. And that's how I saw them. And of course, we gave them food. And then we went back. Now, that was before they would collect us into ghettos. But the system was not collect people into ghettos. The system was to collect people into these segregated houses. And then one by one, they would take a segregated house or two, get all the people out from there, and have them go to be deported somewhere in trains and everything. So it wasn't just going into a ghetto. There would be too many people in a ghetto, but they eliminated a lot of people. The first the men to slave labor, and then the women and the children to be gassed or whatever they would do away from the city. The city people didn't know what was going on. We didn't know, but although we heard, and finally we did hear that these people never come back. My uncle, who came out, he was allowed out by a very caring supervisor. Not everybody in Hungary was really mean. And he gave a little note that he's allowed out, even though he was a Jew, for getting his children. And he got me and his children and my little sister together, because he knew when they were taking all these remaining people out to be deported, that if a woman has young children, neither of them will be allowed to survive. But a woman alone might be able to survive because she would be a possible resource as a worker. And so he got me at an additional danger to himself, because it's an extra trip, and then got me to my mother and my little sister. That was the last time I saw my mom. And then he took us into what was supposed to be a protected house for children. I'm not sure if it was only for Jewish children. It may have been for anybody. Although I think it was a school for the deaf, because there were a lot of children there that made funny noises. They really couldn't talk. So they would be using these guttural sounds. Now, that is when the people came for us to get us into the ghetto. By this time, it was cold, winter, or getting to be winter. And the people who were in this building told us to go down to a pantry and get out whatever we could, food, and then go outside. So I went down, and there was not much there. There was a can of, or like a box of Ovaltine that was like a chocolate thing.
Powder, yeah.
Yes, and that's what I had. And then we went outside in the freezing cold, and there was snow. And then we were marched. We didn't know where we were going to be marched. We thought, by this time I knew a lot, and I just was, it was about my birthday. I think I was turning 12. And so I knew about a lot of people who were marched to the edge of the river. The Danube River runs through Budapest, and they were shot into the river. I think there's a memorial there of all the little shoes on the side of the river. But so I thought we were going to be shot. Some people who were really nice people, but they were scared too, would come behind and say, give us the babies. And my little cousin gave her baby's brother to a lady to be saved, because she too thought that we will be shot into the river. So that is when we went into the ghetto. We were marched in, and were told where to be. I stayed with my sister, clung to me, because she was really a mama's child. You know, she was the baby in the family. And so she decided I am the mama. Now, just turned 12. But I did take on the role of protecting my sister. And we stayed together. At first, we were given some mixture of what's called BB soup. It was beans and peas powdered, and it must have been from the bottom scrape, because there were little worms in it and everything. So, but we really haven't had anything to eat. We ate it, we drank it. And then all this time, the war was getting right to Budapest. We actually had all the noises, all the whistling sounds of guns, bullets going by. I remember my sister was inside, and I would be going out looking for food, because sometimes I thought people would leave something, because we were very hungry. And I found some chicory and some dried onions, and I brought them to my sister. We were very, very cold. We huddled together. And then as the war came further in, we were told to go down to the cellars. Now, the cellars are not like the parking places in the apartments now. They were dirt cellars with things for coal, and the ground was earth. And there were some places where they had some tables. And I remember lying down on a table with my sister, and just close together to keep warm. And the only thing I thought about was food. I thought of all the noodles and pastas that I was such a fusspot before. I wouldn't eat just to drive my mother crazy. So, because she wanted me to eat because I was sick, and she wanted me to be healthy. So I held that over her, I'm not going to eat unless you do this or do that, but poor mom. So I thought about it. And later, one of the children, when I was in a talk like this, asked me, why didn't you yell and cry and shout, that this shouldn't happen? And I said, I was dying. I really didn't have the energy or the strength. And I didn't even feel hungry anymore, just sleepy. All I wanted to do was sleep. And that was the time we were in the ghetto. No food coming in, no one going out.
And then how were you rescued from the ghetto?
Well, because this is when you were talking about the miracles.
Yes.
I really was probably a day or two away from dying from starvation. The Russians came to Hungary and they actually overran Budapest. When they got to that area, that they were terrible. They did all kinds of bad things to people that you hear about that happen in wars. But when they came to the ghetto and they saw what kind of a place it was, they were nice to us and let us out. However, I don't remember it much. I think I was unconscious because when I became conscious, I was in another place already with a bed, and possible food, because I was strong enough later to get up and walk around. In fact, I explored outside too. My sister wouldn't move. She was much too tired and too scared to do anything.
So where were you when you woke up?
Not sure. I still don't know. Everything. First of all, I even didn't know where I was in the ghetto. I did. As a youngster, I was mostly in our grandparents' apartment, so I didn't know very much about where I was for my environment, and I just knew it was a house. I wasn't questioning things. I just was happy to be alive. And I didn't know where I was, but I knew how to get back to it when I was exploring. And I walked out, and one day, by the way, I didn't even feel anything. I think I have just let go of all my feelings. I didn't feel scared or worried. I didn't feel sad. All I was feeling was what to eat, and that my sister should eat. Yes. That's basically all. I was I did find some people at the end in an apartment building that I used to be with, Auntie Margaret. And once I recognized the building, my feelings came back of relief or something else, and I started to cry.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the joint was and a little bit about the War Orphans Project?
Well, that came later, of course, because when I went into that apartment where I stayed with my Auntie Margaret, the lady who was owning that apartment got in touch with my grandparents, and my grandparents and an aunt and another cousin from Germany who was not Jewish, but she really was a wonderful lady, would get us and get my cousins. So we were there, and we were getting in touch with organizations. So the joint was, I don't know, it's a kind of thing called a Jewish overseas, whatever kind of rescue place that would be trying to help all the Jews that did survive. And that came later. At first, we were just sent off. My grandparents sent me off to the countryside. And that wasn't just for Jewish children. This was for all kinds of children who were deprived of food over the war years, because the general population didn't have much food either. And we were sent to the country to be fattened up. Except for my cousin Haiti, she was so sick from the starvation. She didn't have enough, I think, maybe not enough red blood cells or something like that. So she had to stay home. But my sister and I and my little cousin Imre were sent off to be fed up. And in the country, that's where I became familiar with country life a little bit. Boring. It was just, they were very nice people, and I was now 12 and a half or so, and they said they're going to be in the country. They're going to go and give me a job to take the cow to the meadow where it can eat. And so I was taking this cow to where it could graze, and then just sit there and wait, and then bring the cow back. So I found some books with this family. So I took them while I was watching the cow. But when I finished all the books they had, they didn't have many. I wanted to go and get back to the center area of where we were. They had the youngest children who couldn't go to the farms. And so I was not a very grateful recipient of the nice people, you know. And then we were taken back at the end of the summer to Budapest. And by that time, people started coming out from concentration camps. And so my grandparents and my aunt and my mother's cousin, Helen, had only a one-room apartment and all these children. So they couldn't keep us all. They put us into orphanage.
Yeah. And then from the orphanage, I just want to be mindful of time. I want to make sure that we get through everything and leave time for questions. So after the orphanage, you went to your aunt's. And your
Well,
cousin Rudy gave you a bit of a hard time.
oh, well, yes. But the orphanage, that's important about the orphanage, because the orphanage was really group therapy. And this was a Zionist orphanage, and they were trying to get us to become people who would eventually go to Israel. But there was no Israel yet. But they were training these children. So I would be singing songs, and they would be trying to explain to us what happened. I mean, really, you couldn't understand why would such things happen. But they tried to get us to understand that some people are just crazy. They hate people, and there is no reason for it. And that we should be proud to be Jews. We are the people who gave the 10 Commandments. The whole world is going by the laws that are based on the commandments, and that Jews should be proud of themselves. And I became very angry, but at the same time, I didn't want to go to Israel, because they were saying, we'll go to Israel and we will go and farm the land, and we will carry guns. And I thought, oh my God, I don't want to farm any land. It's just like the country. And I certainly don't want to shoot anyone. So I asked my Aunt Margaret to get me to be with her, because by this time, she was able to get a little bit of a home. When she put me into the orphanage, she told me, when I have a place, there'll be room for you. So I remember that, and I went back to her and I said, I want to come out. So I came out, she took me out, and my little sister came too. And she was wonderful to us. She had 2 sons, and she always wanted a little girl. So now she had 2 little girls, and she was really great with us. And I was sent to school.
And you excelled when you were in school too.
Oh, I was terrible at school. Yes, I did excel, but I didn't excel out of being interested in my studies. I was very angry, and I wanted to show the other kids that I am so smart and I am better than everybody else. I'm probably horrible,
No.
Just being a show off. And but really, it was hard I was still an outsider at the school. I was still a Jewish girl as far as they were concerned, who's not one of them, who's somebody else. And nobody except one teacher understood that I was left without a father and a mother and a home of my own. After all this, they didn't understand at all. In fact, they would send notes home to take home, and I would sign it and give it back to them. And they had no idea the circumstances or the experiences I had. And the kids still saw me as an outsider. And I saw myself as an outsider, except I felt also that I didn't care to be part of them. And that is when I got involved with the Joint at that time, to go, and they were like this Azrieli Foundation, like a family. They were so wonderful to the surviving children. They showered us with canned peaches and with Hershey chocolate bars, and anything really that they could. And I would take them home and I would eat part of the chocolates, of course, and shared with my sister. But there was also, they said, that if I want to go away from Hungary, they would be able to take me and my sister to another country where we would be adopted. And I wanted to go because of the way I felt about Hungary and about the people who did these things to us.
And so this is where you were connected with the War Orphans Project.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about the War Orphans Project and your journey to Canada.
Well, the War Orphans Project was just what I said, that they would go ahead and they went through all the papers and they would connect with different countries. South Africa was one of them. Australia was another, where there were Jewish communities. And they would say to the Jewish communities to take in these children. What these poor Jewish communities didn't know, that the children were now 3 years older, and they were old enough to start with to be able to survive. So they would be troubled teenagers. So when they
were expecting young children and ended up with grumpy teenagers instead.
They ended up not wanting these grumpy teenagers, you know, and the grumpy teenagers also didn't want to be, many of the teenagers liked being now independent and nobody telling them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I wasn't one of them. I wanted a family, and my little sister was still very young. You know, she was now 13. I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
And we were people who, my sister actually didn't want to leave my Auntie Margaret, but then she also didn't want to leave me. So she decided to come with me.
Yeah.
But as soon as we got here, they separated us.
So tell us a little bit about your journey to Canada. So you went on the Aquitania.
Well, before I went to the Aquitania, my aunt got me on that train.
Yes.
And this train went all over Europe in a way. I mean, I haven't been on yes, I was on a train before, but, you know, this was by myself, like with all the other kids. And in a group of kids, it was interesting. Then we were staying in Paris, or in the outskirts of Paris, called Juan-Josos. This was a small suburb near Paris. And wonderful food, and everything I was looking at food. And I felt very bad that I didn't speak French, because the kids went into Paris to sightsee, but I was scared to go with them. Some of these teenage kids were, I don't think, quite trustworthy. And from my my grandmother's books, I knew a little bit about guys, that we have to be careful. And I hated the idea that I would be taken to some place where I don't know anything and I don't know how to talk. And I would be stuck with these teenagers and I don't know how they would behave towards me. So I didn't go, I stayed put. And I said, one day I will learn French and I will come back to Paris. So then we went to England just for a night. And of course, I had a terrible experience of very sparse food. As far as I was concerned. It was a very big disappointment. And then we were taken to Southampton and got on this beautiful ocean liner.
Beautiful. And so when you arrived to Toronto, what was that like?
Well, once we arrived, we were taken into uh, a fairly large house, which is now presently, I think, a Jewish library. At that time, they housed a lot of newcomer surviving people, and they were trying to get them places. They gave me an opportunity to go and have an English as a second language class for a few weeks while they were trying to find homes for us. They found a home for my sister, who they were going to adopt, so they said. But they couldn't find a home for me. So they were going to put me into a rental room. Mm-hmm. And I somehow got it across that no way will I go into a rental room. I was promised that I will be taken in by a family. And that's what my Auntie Margaret was promised, that I will be taken into a family. And so eventually they found a very nice family for me, under duress from me. So that's what happened.
And so your family that you were with, they were the Feingold's family.
That's right.
And so can you tell us just a little bit? We have maybe 8 minutes left until we're going to open it up for questions. So can you tell us a bit about the Feingolds?
Well, the Feingolds originally came from Russia, I think, and they were, Mr. Feingold was a truly good man. In fact, he's donated a Torah to the Black community in Harlem, to the Jewish community there. And he wasn't a rich man. And he's buried in Bnei Barak, where the righteous are buried. And so it's Mrs. Feingold, because of course she wanted to be buried there. And I visited their grave at one time. But Mrs. Feingold was different. Mr. Feingold would ask me questions, and when I could answer, I could see tears in his eyes. He was so sympathetic and caring. And when my little sister came to visit, he used to go and sneak money into her hands. Mm-hmm. So that kind of a man. But Mrs. Feingold was very snobbish with me. I don't think she really could read or write. You know, from the education people had for girls, lack of education for girls from before. But she made herself feel very important. She used to go and have her nails done and so on. And she was appalled at my lack of being ladylike. Definitely was, and I still am not ladylike. She also didn't trust me in the kitchen because I didn't know anything about kashrut, how to keep the Jewish laws and dietary laws. I didn't mind not being in the kitchen at all. So that was fine with me. And but she also didn't understand how hard it was for me to be going to school every day and not knowing the language. Mm-hmm. It was very hard at the beginning. They also thought that I wasn't Jewish enough because I couldn't speak Yiddish. Now, that was ignorant on their part, because Yiddish, it was, of course, a Middle Ages language adjustment for the Jews. Their original language is Hebrew. But you see, I studied German in Hungary, and so I knew enough German. So I figured it out that Yiddish is really German, and I could then communicate with them with a slight adjustment in the dialect.
Beautiful. maybe two more questions and then we'll open it up to all of, I see some questions are coming in. So what was it like to write your memoir? Because you wrote it with your sister, and if you haven't had a chance to read it yet, the memoir alternates each chapter back and forth between the perspective of Kitty and her sister Ellen. So what was it like to write your memoir?
Well, my sister and I actually never got together again to live together again. She married young, she moved to California and raised her children there. But we talked to each other often and we wrote letters to each other often. So when I realized that my children and my grandchildren don't really know anything about what happened, I decided that we should write it down. And I talked to my sister and I said, I want you to write down your memories. I write mine down and we will put it together. And that's what we did. It was very easy to do because, of course, we know our own story. It wasn't hard for us to do that. And this is what we did. When we made a book that was before the one you see, just had our story printed out to give to our children and grandchildren. And then I became aware of the Azrieli Foundation, and I asked them if they would like to have a copy, and they said yes, and they wanted to make a book of it.
Yes.
But it was very easy to do.
It sounds like it. Is there a final message that you would want to leave to the students in Manitoba?
My goodness, it is so hard to believe that people would have done, or the people thinking now that it's all right to do the things they do to other people. Human beings are all brothers and sisters. They should not let go of each other. They should support each other. They should care for each other. That is, we should understand that we have different opinions. It's all right. We can discuss them, but not to hurt each other. But I believe really in love. I do. I think that it's the most important thing. And all my life, I have done that. I cared for the children that I raised, and I have taken in children who lost their mother. I have taken in children who otherwise would have been in different kind of foster homes or became a shelter for them. And I think it's so easy to be nice to people. We should all try to do the very best we can for each other.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So Belle, I'll turn it over to you because I see questions are constantly popping in and we'll try to get through as many as we can. So why don't you go ahead and choose the first question?
I will. And thank you so much, Kitty, for sharing your story with us. Some of these questions have been answered as the conversation went along. But here's a question that came from a number of people, and I'm actually going to combine two. What was your favorite book to read when you were alone at your grandmother's house? And this comes from Aviva at Brock Corden School. And then Ariel, also from Brock Corden, lots of questions from Brock Corden, thank you, asks if there were any books for you to read when you got to the house in Toronto? So questions about books.
Well, in my grandmother's home, she had a lot of books on psychology. I was reading, I think, Freud and the kind of sexual repression of women, and that was about 9, 10 years old. And that's why, I was so cautious. Yes, that was my favorite book.
And did you have books in Toronto that you were eventually able to read, or books
in Toronto, at first I couldn't read anything. I didn't have any Hungarian books. But when I was 16 years old, which was about a half a year after I arrived to Toronto, I had a birthday party, and one of my so-called ship brothers gave me a used book for a present called Forever Amber, which was a, a book that was, again, you know, you give children to read books that they're interested in, they'll become readers. And certainly I wanted to hear all about this lady who had all these adventures and was managing through her charm, shall we say, to survive and become a very powerful woman in England. And of course, the churches and everything were really saying that it's an evil book and they were forbidding it to be read. So I read it many, many times during the December holidays. And by the time I finished reading it over and over, I became pretty good in English.
And that's a very helpful way of learning. I remember reading that book myself. Ethan from Brockcorden asks, if other than your sister, did you have any friends in the ghetto? And I'll add to that, and if so, were you able to stay in touch with them after you came to Canada?
No, I had nothing. I had totally was isolated just with my sister. As a matter of fact, I didn't have friends before, and I didn't have friends after the ghetto either. I think I was a troubled child. I found comfort in reading and in art. I would draw things, and I was I'm totally different now. I'm a very gregarious person. I love to talk, and I have lots of friends, but I didn't have any friends. I was a total loner.
Were you did you ever go back to Hungary and see your Auntie Margaret or anyone else?
Well, I helped bring Auntie Margaret out. Her husband and even horrible cousin Rudy was here. And I brought out a lot of help, bring a lot of the family out. In fact, they all came out to Canada because we wrote such nice things about Canada. But I forgot the beginning of the question.
If you ever went back to Hungary to see your aunt.
Yes, well, I went back to Hungary twice. I went back the first time with my husband and my children, some of my children, and it was a very good thing because that is when I let go of my anger. I saw the people there now as an adult, and they were very nice to me. And I also realized that these were not the people who were there when I was a child. Those people were dead long ago. And these people know nothing about the Holocaust or what happened, and they're not to be blamed. So I stopped being angry. And I'm glad I went back. And of course, my husband had a wonderful time because the food is terrific there in Hungary. And now, the second time I went back, because my young grandson decided that I was Hungarian and he would be wanting to learn Hungarian. And he did learn quite a bit of Hungarian from self-help, and he was only 11 years old. So I thought he deserves to go to Hungary. So when he was 12, and I took him and his sister to Hungary, and they had a lovely time. And I reunited again with those cousins that I was in the ghetto with.
Ashley McLennan of Robertson School says that the class would like to know if you still have your yellow star.
No, I don't think I even have anything from Hungary ever, but I remember that's sort of burnt into my memory.
Hmm. And Carrie Martin, who is an educator, asks, how did you feel emotionally after getting through the war?
As I told you, at first I was very confused, and then I became very angry, and and that's basically the way I felt. And then I wanted to leave everything and everyone. So I just walked all over in Budapest trying to recall, because I did think the city was beautiful. I didn't want to leave the city. I just wanted to leave the people. Yes, but so I felt angry. And until I went back to Hungary the first time, when I let go of my anger. And you see, I care for people, and I don't feel that way anymore the way I did. I just I think that people should just not allow these things to happen. If they happen, they should speak up or protect the people who are being abused. Certainly, we have enough people here who are treated badly, as Belle was saying, as you were saying, that about the indigenous people. I mean, it's very similar in so many ways. I relate to that.
Here's an interesting question from Deandra Etkin, also Brockorden. Did you ever see your baby cousin again, the one who was handed to the person in Hungary? This actually comes from a student named Rose.
That little boy, I think, is alive somewhere as a man, but we never found him. His mother forever mourned about him, and I think he's alive. If maybe not now, because I'm so old, and he would still be old as well. He would never know even what happened, how he was raised, or why he has not had the same family that he started out with.
Very, very sad. And if he even knows, of course. Courtney Sunnard from Hartney School, grade 6, asks, do you think about the difficult experiences that you had often, or were you able to move forward eventually in peace?
I think the difficult experiences I had make me a better person in a way, because I'm compassionate. I am with the underdog. I am with the victims. And many times, just the fact I'm even now, it's not always easy to talk about the things that happened. And today I came out sick because I think it's too important for me not to tell the story. But yes, I think I became a caring, compassionate person because of the experiences.
Thank you. Kenneth, who is a student of teacher Orisia Petrushin from Sisler High, asks, how was life between the end of the war and your arrival in Canada? And how were Jewish people in Canada treated at that time?
Well, in Canada, I think the Jewish people were treated very well. And now it's not so great, but at that time, just people were fine, I didn't, in fact, when I was placed into a high school, and in a small high school, and I was so well treated, so compassionately by the teachers. They made it possible for me, if you read the story, to even skip a year after They gave me the wrong exam paper and I passed it. So, and when I couldn't get into teachers' college because of my accent, my guidance teacher, Miss Fraser, I still remember, made a point of making sure that I will be having a future, and she got me a bursary to the university. That was my introduction to higher education. By the way, I'm the only one in my family who went to university because just we weren't the university, we were the working class people in Hungary. But yes, it opened up the caring in the school. To me, that represented the Canadians, was very, very positive.
Thank you. We have an anonymous question here, but a very interesting one. Do you think anything on this scale, such as the Holocaust, will ever happen again?
I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine. I cannot even imagine what has happened. It doesn't seem that people would organize something like a machine factory to kill people. And they didn't just kill 6 million Jews, they killed 6 million other people as well. They were expendable. Well, what I worry about is the kind of atomic warfare that people could do. But I cannot see that they would systematically kill everybody because of their color or their religion. I don't know. I can't imagine that it's possible. I'm not sure though. If it was done once, perhaps some people would do it again. I certainly hope not.
And perhaps one final question from Kelly Hebert, who is a teacher who is currently developing the mandated curriculum for Holocaust education for Manitoba. And Kelly says, anti-Semitism is on the rise in Canada and around the world. How can we help students become upstanders today?
I think just what we are doing, talking to people. Of course, since I am now in my 90s, I don't know if you will have too many people my age who is able to express themselves, but just giving them the reading and discussions is important. And the messages that we are as survivors give to other people. I think I have heard other survivors talk, and they have the same message, to be caring for one another and not to allow gossip and demonization of people to survive.
I also want to add one thing that I think would be really helpful is that sometimes when we don't know about something that feels scary, and then the feeling of fear quickly turns into anger, which then spirals into hatred. And I think that it starts with being open-minded to learning about people who are different and being open-minded to accepting others and not wanting to change them or change yourself to be more like them, but just accepting differences in other people, in other religions, in other cultures, and being open-minded to learning about those things so that this idea of it being unknown, we kind of remove that. The more we are open-minded to learning about other people and other religions and cultures, I think that's a great first place to start.
I have a song, if you don't mind.
Oh, I never mind. I love when you sing songs.
Oh, well, this one with my voice, it doesn't work, but this was a camp song, a Camp Northland song, I think.
Like an overnight camp.
Yes.
Just want to clarify.
I'm proud to be me, but I also see you're just as proud to be you. We may look at things a bit differently, but lots of good people do. It's just human nature. So why should I hate you for being as human as I? We live and let live, and we give and forgive, and we'll all get along if we try. I'm proud to be me, but I also see you're just as proud to be you. It's true. You're just as proud to be you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Kitty. This has been wonderful. Thank you to all the teachers out there and the many, many students. And thank you for all you do and reminding teachers that if you haven't yet got Kitty's memoir, you can still order it at no cost. Thank you. And we will wish you all success in your studies, teachers and students, and we'll be in touch with several opportunities that we have for you. And have a lovely day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
You all.